Hello, and welcome to this Australia-New Zealand Women's Declaration International webinar for February 2024. My name is Janet Fraser, coming to you from Gundunger, west of Sydney. I'm the convener of the Feminist Legal Clinic in Exile. Tonight I have Bronwyn Williams from the Feminist Legal Clinic doing tech with me, and Janet from New Zealand also here in the background. Wherever you're coming from this evening, we pay our respects to elders past, present, emerging, and particularly the women of this continent. We have 3 speakers tonight, whom I'll introduce in turn. A reminder that the presentation is recorded and question time is not. When we end for question time, I'd appreciate it if you use the Q&A box for written questions so I don't lose them in the chat. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand icon and I will keep a running list of the order in which I see you appear. Please keep your question to a maximum of 2 minutes with a question mark at the end. I will be timing questions and I will ask you to bring it to a close at the 2-minute mark, so please be aware. And now to introduce our excellent panel. Ali Marie Diamond is a co-founder of the survivor-led organisation Wahine Toa Rising, a mum and a memar. Wahine Toa Rising is a member of the Coalition for the Abolition of Prostitution, CAP International, of which Ali Marie is also a board member. She is soon to be a host on Red Light Expose, an international survivor-led circle which formed in 2023 to combat the growing acceptance and endorsement of sex work ideology. Ali Marie will also be letting us know about the documentary currently touring Australia called Buying Her. DEB Hayes is a 62-year-old mother and grandmother. These are the most important roles in her life, though closely followed by her 33-year career as a midwife. She works in a primary unit in the South Island of New Zealand. It's lovely work, mainly normal physiological births and supporting breastfeeding. Sarah Henderson is a member of Let Kids Be Kids, Mana Wahine Korero, and Suffragettes New Zealand, and is a linguist and former newborn hearing screener who writes about authoritarianism, gender, history, language, and culture. She's been writing on and following the Midwifery Council capture closely since 2022. So we are going to start tonight with Ali Marie Diamond, and let's welcome all our speakers. Thank you for being here. Ali, can we have a chat about what you're doing at the moment with Wahine Toa Rising? And could you tell me about the situation in Queensland?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. It's always an honour to be here with you all. So right now the situation in Queensland is the Attorney General, our latest one, has tabled the full decrim bill here and now goes to a committee before it is voted on. Last year, the police powers to prosecute street solicitation was removed. Prostitution or the sex trade in Queensland is legalised. Yeah, it's not much of a switch from where it is now into full decriminalisation, but we're still trying to work really, really hard to just keep it out, especially with the Olympic Queensland hosting the Olympic Games in 2032. We know that when there's big events like this, and the demand is there, the sex trafficking increases, as does the exploitation of vulnerable women and girls. So submissions are now being taken into the inquiry of the Queensland Prostitution Bill. The deadline is the 8th of March. So if anyone would like to write a submission, we're encouraging everyone from everywhere, globally, international, everywhere, to write a submission. So I can provide that link to Janet for everyone if you like after the meeting.
And so have you been writing submissions and speaking to politicians? What have you been doing?
But since the beginning of last year, we have been writing letters to members of parliament, writing to the Attorney General. Last year it was Shannon Fentiman, this year Yvette Das, doing everything that we possibly can to secure meetings with both Attorney Generals, but not surprisingly, we haven't been able to get in there. we've gone into Parliament and met with members of Parliament at a forum last year in Brisbane. That was not a great experience. It was really tough. I learned in that moment that we only have one house in Queensland. So there isn't as much accountability, I suppose, as there are in other states with upper house and lower house. And a lot of them on the Labor side were saying, look, there's nothing we can do. Even though we don't agree with it, we can't do anything about it, because if we do, then we're likely to get kicked out. So it was a very frustrating forum. Came away very discouraged, but have still been pushing on and still writing letters and trying to get meetings with members and especially with the Attorney Generals.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough that women have to take their trauma and speak to politicians who are somehow unaware, unwilling, denying the fact that the sex trade just means trauma for women, and women have to go and talk about it in order to try and prevent trauma for other women.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about what's happening in South Australia as well?
Yeah, so South Australia is last year a member, Nicola Centifanti, and I keep forgetting to ask her how to pronounce it. I think it's Nicola Centifanti or Centifanti, I'm not sure which one, but she tabled the Equality Bill last year. Incredibly brave member of Parliament, incredibly courageous. I have so much respect and admiration for her. So that was tabled in South Australia last year. We've been working really, really hard with upper house members, because that's where it's sitting at the moment. And we didn't quite have the numbers for it to go to vote last year. So we've been working on getting those numbers this year. So I can't tell you exactly when it's going to vote, but it looks like somewhere towards the end of March.
Right. Okay. So what could the women here do to support you in South Australia?
So we have a few members down there that we really do need to, I guess, put some pressure on to vote the right way. So I'm more than happy to provide those emails too, if anyone is feeling compelled or called to write to these members. I think the more pressure that they have, the better. I think that the more they know that there's people out there who care and who support the Equality Mill and support Nicola, the better as well. So I can definitely provide some emails for that if anyone would like to write to them. I think that's the best support at the moment. Once it goes into lower house, I'm very hopeful, then we'll have a whole new bunch of things that you'll be able to do.
That's great. And I've written to Nicola. I sent her an email saying thank you and we love your work. Please keep it up. It must be really tough.
It's amazing.
So can you tell us a bit about Buying Her, which I think women can buy tickets for all capital cities or most?
Yep, most capital cities. So they start their screening in Auckland on the 28th of February. Then they're going to Tauranga, and then Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. You can get the details for all the screenings on www.buyingher.com. We just had a press release come out, so I will give you a bit of an idea. I have seen the movie. It's brilliant. Buying Her is the first ever documentary to explore the lives of sex buyers and what drives them. It takes on the critical issue of ending the demand that fuels the global issue of sex trafficking and exploitation. It is focused on sex buyers in the United States, but as we know, sex buyers are pretty much the same in any country. They're not different in one country to another country. They're the same across the board. Through deeply insightful first-hand accounts, the film lays bare their journey from their childhood exposure to pornography to becoming hardened predators and ultimately to what turned their lives around. The powerful real stories captured in Buying Her are a beacon of hope for the restoration of broken and hurting hurt men, accountability for those who have done harm to others, and bringing about the end of sex trafficking and exploitation for good. I have seen the documentary. It's a very powerful documentary that really links pornography, the purchasing of women and girls, into sexual violence outside of pornography and the sex trade. And I think those links are really important. Too often at the moment in Australia and New Zealand, there is no links between sex trafficking and exploitation of women and sexual violence. They all seem to be very separate topics. You know, you have one law for sex trafficking, another law for the sex trade, another law for sexual violence. What's missing is the links between them all. And there are very clear links there if we just, somehow can join the dots and show people that they're there.
Yeah, the pimp lobby has been very effective in creating the idea that trafficking is bad, but the sex trade is great.
Yep. You ask one person, they'll say to me, oh yeah, but your story is different, you were sex trafficked. And then you ask another person and they'll say, oh yeah, but you only ended up like that because of the childhood sexual abuse. And then you'll ask someone else and they'll go, oh yeah, but you chose to be there. So there's no, there's very blurred lines between everything.
Yeah. And just lastly, Ali, could you tell us a bit about red light expose?
Yeah, so last year I was invited by Ali Arrow, who is an amazing feminist in Germany, who does a lot of writing and speaks out a lot about the sex trade and full decriminalisation, things that are happening in Germany and in New Zealand, and also Andrea Hines, who is in Canada, I believe. And they were starting a great podcast called, and now completely, what's it called again, Janet? I've just had a mind blank.
But we can put it in the chat because
Ali
will find.
It's very new, but it's about, I guess, debunking all the myths that are out there at the moment around the sex trade, like sex workers' work and all those things. So it's a new podcast that will be specifically focused on debunking those myths, which is very exciting.
Fantastic. That's really great. Podcasts are so awesome, particularly for women to listen to. All right. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us, Ali Marie Diamond?
No, is there anything else you'd like me to share? I guess I also want to say, Wahine Toa Rising is a survivor-led organisation, but it's important to know that any survivors that are speaking out, they all do it through volunteering, and because we have a strong passion to make sure that no other women and girls go through what we have been through, to somehow try and make a difference, not just for vulnerable women and children, but our own future generations, women and girls everywhere, and especially boys and men, to start changing that narrative and those society rules of, so many 18-year-olds used to come into the brothel when they were 18. It was like it was a rite of passage. So changing, I guess, those cultural beliefs. But it's important that any survivors you support them and you love on them and you nurture them, because they relive everything that they're going through every time they speak, every time they do this work, each time they advocate. It just chips away a little bit more, of their soul through reliving it. So Wahine Toa Rising is survivor-led, but we are there's only a handful of survivors. So if anyone feels called to support us in any way, whether it might be on the board or helping us with our social media or our press releases, anything that can support us to be allowed a voice, we would really, really appreciate it, because we are doing it tough at the moment.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate your work, and I have a small window of insight from what you shared into how grueling it is to be constantly re-traumatizing yourself to try and prevent it happening to other women. So thank you. Thank you very much. So
thanks for having me.
Anytime. Now I'd like to pass over to Deb Hayes, please. Yes, go.
Can you hear me? Hello. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for coming to listen to us. You've gone, Janet. Is that okay? Okay. Anyway, I expect that every one of us has felt the full cascade of emotions that women have when we see what's happening to women's rights in the world. Sometimes I think it can't be happening. I had no idea that women's rights could be so fragile. I often wish that my senses hadn't been assaulted by this mess. But you can't unsee it. I'm haunted. I grew up safeguarding myself from harm from men. I don't remember anyone telling me to cross the road, to avoid men, to keep out in the open, to not wear provocative clothing. It's the way of the world that men are the biggest threat to us. And the world is dismantling our safeguards at rapid speed. So I am here to talk about the New Zealand Midwifery Council's plans to cancel all reference to women, babies, wahine, breastfeeding, motherhood in its scope of practice, and replace it by the word whānau, which is a beautiful word, but it is all-encompassing of a Maori word for family and often extended family. So I'll just take you through what I've been experiencing in the last few years before the scope came to my notice, really, and just at work as a midwife in this small unit in the South Island. So I've noticed a shift in language in documents, posters, IT forms from various departments, in fact, nearly all departments that we interface with. Some of the favourite expressions are cervix havers, birthing person, chest feeding, non-gestating parent, sex assigned at birth. Maternity has gone, and now the preference is perinatal. I think maternity is just too maternal. We have an organisation, the government funded ACC here in New Zealand. It's the Accident Compensation Corporation. And so they cover accidents for rehabilitation. It's government funded. So I guess it saves a lot of legal hassling for people to get compensation. Now, the ACC in recent months have started to include birthing injuries for women, which is fabulous and a long time coming. But the language is hopeless. So they've already adopted the word whānau that encompasses women. So now the whānau has a perineum with a 3rd degree tear. So currently, when I see things like that, I'm tackling them. And I wrote back to ACC, who told me that it was inclusive language. I don't really have an answer. And I feel that if the Midwifery Council gets its way, then if I tackle ACC, then I can be reported and they'll be holding a stick to me. So that's where I sit with that. I'll just tell you a little bit about what the Midwifery Council is responsible for. So they are the responsible authority under the HPCAA, the Health Practitioners Competency and Assurance Act. So they regulate midwives. They set the standards of care for midwives, their education, their performance and their conduct, and of course their discipline. They also organise our practicing certificate, which is an annual affair, and they can put restrictions on our practicing certificate. So just going back to what is happening alongside the midwives' proposed scope of practice and the length of time it's taken to construct it. So it appears that the scope is preparing for a brave new world of men accessing maternity care. I've taken a long time to realise that this is what it's about. I think this is what it's about. The words for woman and baby and mother and breastfeeding are all gone, and our clientele will now be whānau or family. So just looking at statistics, the scope has taken nearly 4 years to construct and nearly $400,000 of Ministry of Health funds, and 19 people to write it. I think their plans were for it to take 2 years, and their estimate was 377,000. And likely, I mean, just guessing that it's 400,000, but it could be a lot more. I don't know. So essentially, the descriptors for anything relating to females and babies are gone. In 2019, when the council applied to the Ministry of Health for funding to reconstruct the scope of practice, its letter stated its intentions of a continuity of care model with women in the context of the whānau at the centre. So that looks like a code. It's very hard to decipher, but I guess when you know what you know now, it appears that what they meant was women are going, and whether the Ministry of Health knows the code or not, I actually don't know. So having whānau as our clientele now means we are mandated to help men who think they are women to chest feed. Also, when women are no longer at the centre of care, there's a scope for bad players to enter. In situations where there's family violence, the partner or other members of the whānau can potentially take precedence over the woman and make decisions for the mother and baby. I just want to talk about statistics because we do need to mention that the women involved that feel like they are men, who seem to be the ones that are very offended by seeing the words women, babies, and anything maternal, appears to be very, very harsh on their senses. So it's estimated that in New Zealand, currently there are about 6 of those women that think they're men that are going to use our services per year, and we have 60,000 births a year, so we'll probably never meet one. But regardless of that, our language is going. It is feasible, though, that this isn't about those women that think they're men. Given that puberty blockers are now prescribed at 10 times the rate of UK here in New Zealand, are mostly prescribed to girls and young women because of their dysphoria and probably a social contagion, then the Midwifery Council are setting us up for increasing numbers of these dysphoric women who think they're men. Going back to the Midwifery Council, there were 2 rounds of stakeholder feedback from the Midwifery Council. The last one was last year, and the respondents, 90.8% disagreed with the council. Only 3.7% agreed. It didn't seem to matter to the Midwifery Council. In late November, the Midwifery Council announced quite quietly that they had unanimously agreed to the new scope, and I then just lost hope. But shortly after this, I happened upon the Substack of Sarah Henderson called Mandated Humility for Midwives. And I got a spark of hope because she wrote something that the Midwifery Council had not been open about, that the scope had to be rubber stamped by Parliament. So we contacted each other and we began to share information and figure out how we might make enough noise about this that we could cause an embarrassment to the Midwifery Council and an unpopular public decision if the Ministry of Health rubber stamps it. So publicity gathered, and then around the 13th of December, the new scope had been removed from the Midwifery Council's website. There's been no correspondence from the Midwifery Council to the midwives why this happened. Also, the Midwifery Council had actually said in their gazette to midwives that they were going to contact us before Christmas to tell us that the scope would be going ahead, and this never happened. So since then, the Midwifery Council has largely remained silent. They don't appear to have submitted the scope to Parliament, but around 2 weeks ago, they gave a statement to a journalist, and when asked, they said that there was no particular definition of a woman. Very sad. So currently, my petition has over 6,600 signatures, and it expires on the 1st of March. And I may just read you what my petition says, if that's okay. So the petition request is that the House of Representatives inquire into the Midwifery Council's decision to use whānau and not the words woman or baby in the scope of practice of a midwife, and whether the Midwifery Council is discharging its regulatory authority duties appropriately under the HPCAA 2003. The petition reason, is the Midwifery Council has agreed to replace the words woman, baby and mother in English and te reo with Māori. Only 3.7% of respondents who submitted feedback in March 2023 agreed with the new scope. 90.8% were negative responses. I believe that the scope is not fit for purpose written this way. The sex-based language is essential for midwifery, and that women's sex-based rights are protected by New Zealand law and the United Nations Convention of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. That was heart-wrenching, but beautifully
Thank you.
done. Thank you so much. I see that Janet has put the petition in the chat, so everybody get about signing that and sharing social media as possibly can. Thank you very much. I look forward to question time. So, Sarah Henderson.
Right. Hi. Deb and Ali, thank you both so much. Ali, that was really moving. I want to go and see that documentary. So when it comes to the Midwifery Council, I fell into this and it struck me rather hard, the whole performance, in November 2022. And I had just joined MWK as a Mana Wahine Kōrero as a member. And for those who don't know, Mana Wahine Kōrero is a group co-founded by Diane Landy and Michelle Uriero. As far as we know, the only Indigenous gender critical women's group in the world. I had seen their videos up online and decided that I needed to meet these women, and so we went down and I went down to meet them. And at the same time was when the Midwifery Council put out their intentions publicly in Stuff, which is an online news outlet, a very captured one. And the way that they were describing what they were going to do, that they were going to take out all the words for women and mothers and babies and so on, it just, the particular reason that they were putting forth to do this was that it was going to benefit particularly Māori women, and that it was going to teach. The gist of this argument was that it was going to teach all of the health professions, not just midwifery, but health generally, how to be more inclusive, more culturally safe, and how to bring Māori women into midwifery in a way that would, improve the outcomes. And to me, removing the words for women and babies, and everything to do with childbirth and pregnancy and conception and child rearing and all of that, to remove all of those words from both English and Te Reo Māori, it certainly didn't sound like it was going to improve any outcomes for any woman. And as from my perspective, and to be clear, I'm a Pākehā woman, a European woman, but my children are Māori. It seemed antithetical to everything that I have ever learned about a Māori worldview, which is very much that childbirth and child rearing and the business of women is a sacred thing, and not to be diminished or removed from language, certainly. So, and I have a particular interest in language as a linguist. And so I started to kind of follow down this rabbit hole of what they were doing. I looked at the scope and I looked at their website, and I began to delve deeper and deeper and deeper. And I also have come to believe, as a linguist, that wokish or woke language is an authoritarian linguistic code. And a linguistic code can be either a language, or it can be the way that you change your language, the way that we speak, from, say, for example, this forum to going outside your own social group, perhaps. And we all speak one or more linguistic codes. And authoritarian or corrupt or totalitarian linguistic codes are the linguistic codes of cults. And they share certain features. They change syntax. The meanings of the words are often completely opposite to what they actually mean, and they're often couched in very glowing propagandist type language, full of slogans, and that actually always means something really dark and horrible. So we're following down this language rabbit hole, and everything that we see in English happening with this wokish is also happening in Te Reo Māori, only, in my opinion, worse, because they have a lot more leeway. There is not very many people in New Zealand actually speak Te Reo Māori, as much as we might want that to be different. It's not. So when they write the translations side by side for what is going on with the English version and the Te Reo Māori version, what they're saying in the Te Reo Māori version isn't quite what they're saying in the English version, and they're also doing a lot of damage to the language. And I think that English will recover quite well, but I'm not too sure about Te Reo Māori being recovering from woke Te Reo Māori in its entirety. And one of the things that I would really like to do is try and form a team of linguists who can help to at least record some of these changes, so that when this time is over, hopefully sooner rather than later, people will be able to at least still recognise what Te Reo Māori actually means versus what this new speak is. So that's one thing. The next part of all of this, as far as the Midwifery Council goes, is going, okay, what are they saying and why are they saying it? And then we start to get into the postmodernist issues, the academic side of these things. And one of the ways that I conceive of this, I don't have a term that I'm happy with as an overall term, but DEI, or as an anagram, DEI can actually be respelled as DIE, which is die, which is what it actually means. diversity, inclusion, and equity are your three main strands of this horrible theory, or these combinations of theories, postmodernist theories. And these three main ones, the theories themselves, are queer theory, critical race theory, and social justice or equity theories. And combined, they have formed into this global, horrible, woman-hating death cult. And this is what we're seeing. And so when we're talking about postmodernists and their desire to deconstruct absolutely everything that goes on in society, they do not believe that the human condition is a real thing. They believe that everything is a social construct, and that language shapes reality in the sense that if I say I'm a man, simply by saying it, I can become one. But that's not the way that language shapes reality. The way that language shapes reality is that we enact the things that we talk about. So this is why language is such an important part of the way to capture the movement, because they know that people, once they speak a certain way, they think a certain way, and they act a certain way, and it's much easier to force us all to actually go along with these ideas. And the deconstruction of human society is about breaking down everything that we hold dear. So our relationships with our families, our relationships with our children, our femaleness, our maleness, men, their maleness, anything that makes us human can be gotten rid of, and is desirable to get rid of. And then you can have anything you want. You can say this can, you can say men can be women. You can say children can have sex with adults. You can say a baby is a whānau. You can say the as Deb said, the whānau has a third degree tear to the perineum. And the ideological capture of the Midwifery Council has been complete and total. They have gone full woke, and they speak nothing but woke speak in the New Zealand version. So this code changes in every country that we go to, and it's the same in English, but with the same kind of subtle variations that we have from New Zealand English to Australian English to American English. And here in New Zealand, it's expressed with this really strong critical race theory element. And this is what they're saying. This is how they're approaching it, is that this language is going to honour the Treaty of Waitangi, which obviously it doesn't. There's certainly nothing in the Treaty of Waitangi about removing all the words for women and babies, because that's good for Wahine Māori and what they would prefer and what we would all prefer. Coming back to this idea of everybody being dehumanized, and the Midwifery Council, they are a goal for the ideologues, and that's one of the reasons that they've fallen so hard, because they've been targeted. And the reason that they've been targeted is that if you want to break down the structure of the family, you want to start at the beginning, preferably before conception. So the people who are responsible for our health and our experience of pregnancy and birth and so on, are obviously a very important target. They are the ones who are going to be most involved in the process of birth when this brave new world is enacted. And so how they went about that, and I think they've been working on this for longer than the 4 years that I can prove they've been working on it. But they set out, first of all, to simply re-educate the midwives by rewording in wokies that all of the scope of all of their education requirements, and the 4-year degree, basically. And then they realized that they couldn't actually do that without rewording the scope of practice, because the scope of practice is the founding document for all midwives in New Zealand. And without it, if you don't adhere to the scope of practice, you can be deregistered, and there is no other option. You can't register with another body. This is it. You either follow the scope of practice and do what they say in that, or you can't practice. And it also governs what they can teach you as a midwife. So this is why they went for the scope of practice so hard, because it underpins what they want to do to education. What they can then do is re-educate any midwives coming through, and they can also identify, punish, and remove any dissenting midwives who are already registered. They can, the wording of the new scope is such that it would be very, very easy to get rid of any midwife who was challenging this status quo. It's so woolly and so vague that the actual, if you read it, the job of a midwife has expanded to essentially mean being responsible for the cultural safety and well-being of an entire whānau, which, as Deb said, is a good word. It actually is a verb. It means to be born, but very few people use it in that context because they don't speak te reo, and the modern version of the word is family. And most of us understand that this means extended family as well. So a single whānau can be a lot of people. And for one midwife to be responsible for the cultural safety and well-being of a whole whānau is just not an appropriate job description. Now, the workforce that they would like to create is a workforce of women, who are midwives, who are going to be very happy to go into or comfortable enough, at least, to go into a delivery room with perhaps a surrogate mother and the two men, or a man who has purchased this baby, and they deliver the baby, remembering that we're talking about a whānau. The woman is part of the whānau, the baby is part of the whānau, and these two men who have purchased the baby are also part of the whānau. So this new workforce is going to be able to go into a delivery room, deliver the baby, quickly whisk this renter uterus, which is what they basically call the gestator, away, pop the man in the bed. He's been having his hormones and is now oozing whatever that muck is from his nipples, and they pop the newborn baby on his chest for skin to skin, and which is obviously not skin to skin. His body is not warm. He doesn't actually have breasts. He doesn't actually produce milk. He's not the mother. The mother is gone. There is no mother. Mother is a dirty word, and it's not a baby that he's bought. It's a new whānau member. So then he has his photo op and his sexual fetish sated, and off they go. And the woman is sort of, whether she's survived or not is unknown at that point, and it's quite likely with our caesarean rates that will continue to go up. So that's what we're looking at, and the Midwifery Council would really like for this to all be ratified and enforced, and all our midwives to be operating under this by the 1st of July. And what they must do is pass the scope to the Minister of Health, who then by law must present it to the House of Representatives. Now, there is a line in the secondary legislation that says that the House may disallow it, but there's no actual context given for what situation that could happen. So whether it's a rescheduling kind of disallowing, or whether it's some kind of problem that they have with it, is unclear. If they do allow it, which is likely if it comes across Shane Retty's desk, he doesn't seem very bothered by it all. then he will have to present it. There won't be any pushback. The House is likely to say, oh yes, just a scope of practice, like the 18 others that we all say yes, and then it goes off to the Regulations Review Committee, and they decide whether it can actually be regulated in its current form. And I suspect that they will run into problems there, because the Regulations Review Committee is made up of 4 people, one of whom is not on board with wokery, and you don't actually have to be a specialist or a lawyer to see that this scope is not fit for purpose, that it can never describe the job of a midwife. If it goes that far to the Regulations Review Committee and we don't manage to get the Ministry of Health apply enough public pressure, either for the Midwifery Council to withdraw it and try again, which I think is unlikely, they're nothing if not committed. And if the Ministry of Health refuses to get involved before the scope, then I think what we will wind up with is a woke light version that goes through the Regulations Review Committee, and it it's going to have basically the same effect. So what we really want is as much public disgust, essentially, for this idea. Just no, there's not actually any reason that's good enough to remove all the words for women and babies and mothers from the language of childbirth. There just isn't. No ideology, no matter how enticing, is a good enough justification for that. Mothers and babies and women in childbirth have been around for millennia. We're not going away, and just no. So that's what's required. We have to push back and put enough public pressure on Shane Retty, particularly the Minister of Health, any other MP that you fancy, make a big song and dance about it, jump out on there on Facebook, whatever social media you've got, tell your friends, tell everyone. DEB's petition has only a few days left to run. It's already one of the most signed petitions in the first 100. Most parliamentary petitions get around 100 to 200, if that, signatures, and over 6,500 tells us that people care. So we really want that to happen. So that's where we're at. That's what I got.
Thank you. That's utterly chilling and terrible. So thank you for bringing it to our attention and sharing the petition, which I've signed, even though I'm not a Kiwi. So I would like to thank our speakers, DEB Hayes, Ali Marie Diamond and Sarah Henderson tonight, for chilling insights into what we're up against right now around the world. I'm going to end our recording and then we will start our Q&A session, and I'm sure there'll be a fulsome discussion about this. Thank you so much, speakers.